Welcome back, everyone. Episode 8 of the Brad Burns Bridges podcast.
I'm Brad.
And I'm Bridges. Man, another week. I'm going to say this one was a tough week, Brad. A tough week of college football. In the pick 'em, I go 3 of 5. Brad has a tough week, 1 of 5. That puts our totals at me 23 of 35 and Brad 18 of 35. So I'm kind of pulling away here. Um, but man, it is the best time of the year officially, Brad. We've got playoff baseball, we've got NBA back, college basketball is kicking off, college football, NFL football. It is an exciting time to be a sports fan. With that being said, we just had two game sevens. So playoff baseball is really delivering right now. We got the Rangers versus the Diamondbacks in the World Series. Brad, you got anything to say about those games?
Yeah, I'm pumped about this matchup. I obviously live in Dallas now, so I'm kind of a fair weather Rangers fan, and then lived in Phoenix for 3 years when I was growing up. So grew up kind of a little bit of a Diamondbacks fan as well. So it's fun to see both these teams make it this far. And honestly, I don't know who I'm going to pull for in the World Series. I love both teams, love kind of the players on both sides. So it's going to be fun. But yeah, I mean, playoff baseball, there's nothing better than playoff baseball.
Oh, absolutely. My favorite thing about it is it's just two teams that have just sucked the past couple years. We're used to seeing these Dodgers, Braves, Phillies, these big name
Yep.
teams that are consistently in the running. And this year you have the Rangers who have been consistently bad for the past couple years, bounce back, have a great year. Actually should have probably been the one seed over there. Struggle towards the end of the year and then they get hot at the right time, beat the Astros, which people cannot do. Awesome to see. And then the Diamondbacks, man, coming out of left field like I saw today that they weren't even going to make the playoffs if the Cubs don't drop a routine fly ball. So I mean, it is
Yeah.
baseball's crazy, super cool to see.
No, it's insane. I mean, both teams 2 years ago had over 100 losses. Both took very two different approaches on kind of rebuilding their team. Rangers, it was through free agency, big signings everywhere, millions of dollars thrown around, and you get some big stars into the lineup, and you kind of see where that the production on the offense. And then for the Diamondbacks, they're just a smaller market team, and so they just built through their farm system. Got a lot of good arms in that bullpen. That's what kind of carried them through the Phillies series. Clutch hitting when they needed it, good defense, good base running. Very interesting, really interesting matchup going into the World Series. Very two different teams. You got the slugging and huge sluggers over at the Rangers, and then kind of the Diamondbacks. Kind of they love the chaos, get on base, make things happen, and then just finish it off with good pitching. So it's gonna be awesome.
It is going to be awesome, man. Cattell Marte, he's been there for forever. He steps up, wins their MVP for ALCS, right? Or NLCS? Well,
NL.
yeah, NLCS. So, and then you have Corbin Carroll, just absolute stud. Tying Dustin
Yep.
Pedroia with 3 hits in a game seven. Great to see. And then you have Adolis Garcia bounce back. I don't really want to dive into the getting hit by pitch because it is what it is. But I mean, he went nuclear and just like propelled that
Yep.
team to a win. It was awesome to see. Great games, man. There's not much better than playoff baseball. I don't watch much like in season, but once it gets to the playoff, it's hard to turn off, especially when these
You can't
series
turn
are
off. Yep.
yeah, for sure. Well, with that being said, man, shout out the Rangers, shout out the D-backs. We're looking forward to the matchup we'll be reviewing in the next couple weeks for sure. Let's hop into college football. USC drops another. This is a team that we both have not been very high on, Brad, and you continue to pick them in the pick 'em. What is going on with the Trojans, Brad?
Yeah, it's not pretty over in Southern California right now. A lot of finger pointing through the coaching staff throughout the team. Um, I even saw kind of a little storyline of Caleb Williams throwing shots at that Notre Dame fan that kind of posted a funny video of him like storming the
Yep.
field, and it's just like super low blows over at Southern Cal, and you kind of wonder where their head's at. I mean, they've got a rest of the season to finish. Everything's still kind of out in front of them. They can still win the Pac-12. Um, it's discouraging for sure in Lincoln Riley's second year. But yeah, not a good sign early on, and it'll be interesting to follow throughout the year. They got some tough games coming up,
Yeah, that's
and
what I was gonna say.
so
They can still win the
we've been
Pac-12,
we've been yeah we've been
but
talking
dang.
about how the Pac-12 is a gauntlet, but yeah, it's not looking too good right now, especially when you drop an out of conference game in there today. That makes it tough.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think there's a lot of fan bases in shambles, with us being one right now. Um, it's always tough seeing the highs. My one question for you, Brad, with this is, are you second guessing Caleb Williams at all? In the big games, he hasn't shown up. He hasn't played his best ball. He's projected to be like one of the best quarterback prospects of all time, but we've seen some stuff that we haven't seen from him in the past. And a lot of turnovers, not showing up in big games. What do you think? What's going on with Caleb Williams?
Yeah, I mean, the offense and the quarterback has never been the issue for Lincoln Riley's teams, and so to see some struggles on that side of the ball is really interesting. Um, I mean, he's had some studs obviously, which has helped Jalen Hurts, Kyler, Baker, but Caleb's supposed to be just as, if not better than all those guys, and so for him to struggle like the way he is, it's pretty interesting, especially in his third year as a starter, second year in this kind of, well, I guess it's the same scheme, but second year at USC. I mean, you should see some comfort level with kind of the way things are run. And it's kind of the exact opposite. Every play, it's kind of just a scramble, try to make something out of nothing. It feels like he has like no rhythm with the offense at all. And he's just trying to play like Superman ball, which is not a good formula. We kind of see that around the NFL. If you're not taking what the defense is giving you and you're just trying to make something out of nothing every play, one, it's exhausting, and then two, it's just like not sustainable offense throughout the entire game. So I think that's kind of what's going on with him right now. Obviously, he's got his sights set on the NFL. That's all we hear about. There's just these rumors on negotiations, what team does he want to go to, this and that, and everything else. And so it's just not. It's almost like his head's not entirely into the football where it needs to be, and just got game preparation. Um, but yeah, it is concerning going into the draft and where he's supposed to be the clear cut number one pick.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that I'm not saying that Caleb Williams is the issue, and I didn't get that from your statement either. I think obviously defense number one issue. It's just a talking point because exactly like you said, this has never been a conversation really with Lincoln Riley led teams, and you're seeing the defense has always been a flaw. So everyone's been able to talk about this,
Right.
and now we're talking about their quarterback, who's supposed to be the best prospect that he's ever had, more talent than all those
Right.
guys, is struggling, and it's something that they're not, dealing with in particularly well. All credit to Utah. Um, I didn't think they were going to win that game. I thought that their defense was good enough to keep them in it, and they were. And the USC defense looked bad again. So moving on, um, I don't really want to recap the Clemson game. I just kind of wanted to bring up, is their dominance over? Because they have owned the ACC the past few years, and it hasn't been a question at the beginning of the year. Clemson's winning the ACC. If they go undefeated or one loss, they're going to be in the playoff. Man, it's a different story this year. What's your thoughts on Clemson? Is Dabo, not the Dabo era over, but is that dominant era over for them going forward?
I I think the era of national titles basically every year. I think that's over. When you go from Deshaun Watson to Trevor Lawrence, and that's your quarterback for, was it 5 or 6 years? I mean,
Yep.
you're gonna win some games, right? Pair that with a Brett Venables led defense. I mean, that's like an unbeatable formula, honestly. And to see what Brett is now doing at Oklahoma, I mean, he's a hell of a coach. And in saying that it took him this long to get a head coaching gig, but when you lose that NFL star quarterback and then defense coordinator like him, I mean, you're gonna run into some issues, and it was pretty apparent last year with DJ at the helm, and then this year with Klubnik. Um, they're still a solid squad, but just not the same as kind of the Clemson we've kind of grown to know. Um, but
Yeah,
yeah, I would say kind of that dominance is over.
yeah. I think the dominance is over. I think it's really funny actually, because last year they pinned a lot of their failures and shortcomings on DJ. DJ transfers, goes to Oregon State, and they're kicking butt, dude. DJ is not the problem.
Yeah,
I'm not saying Dabo's the problem, but I think you're exactly right. Brent Venables has had it, you know, basically under wraps. They've had great defenses every year, and he's been fully capable to lead a program for a while. He waited for the right one to open. OU job opens, he goes and takes it. Their defense is still like, I'm not saying they're bad by any means, but they aren't elite anymore. You're
yeah,
seeing the struggles there. I think in this world with the SEC becoming what it's going to become with Oklahoma and Texas, basically becoming a super conference and having the Big 12 and the SEC kind of just like going at it each year with playoff contenders and all the teams going. I think it's going to be really hard to have kind of a dynasty in the ACC going forward, especially when you have these super conferences. Texas is coming in. They look good. OU looks good. And then a lot of those Pac-12 teams moving over. So I think things are going to get really interesting over there. But I agree. I think it's going to be hard for Clemson to do that, but it ain't happening. Dabo's still a good coach. I still like him, but it's going to be tough sledding. Moving on,
yeah.
or do you got another point?
Well, I was just gonna say Dabo's the type of coach. Yes, I agree he's a good coach, but he's the type of coach that relies heavily on his coordinators.
Yeah,
And so, I mean, it's kind of the same issue Saban's run into in the past few years, losing all the coaches he's lost. With the success Clemson has had, all the coordinators are now getting head jobs, and so he's kind of running into the same issue. And so, who knows what can happen in the future? Maybe he gets the right guys in place, but it's a hard thing to do. And we've seen the same issues at Bama.
yeah. Moving on, SEC ball. I believe we had a SEC versus the field debate, which is still up and running. I just kind of wanted to bring up. It looks like Bama, Georgia, all the way now. Obviously, they're going to have to win out. I think Bama's road only gets easier. I think they kind of faced a gauntlet of games. Still, they have LSU, but I think Georgia's schedule is getting tougher. So it's going to be interesting to see going forward. But I mean, do you think it's
I'm excited for
Bama,
that Mizzou
Georgia like
game.
me? Yeah, yeah. I mean, do you think there's another team that's kind of in the running? Obviously records. There's Mizzou with one loss, but I mean, do you think there's like
Mm-hmm.
a team that poses a threat to win the East or a team that poses a threat to win the West at this point, other than those
I
two?
think Mizzou faces Georgia at a pretty vulnerable time. I mean, Brock Bowers is out. Um, it's in Athens, which is kind of tough for the Tigers, but they're rolling right now. I've watched a few games. Luther Burden's a beast. They got guys all over the field who were somewhat decently highly recruited, and Eli Drinkowitz is doing a good job kind of with the development as well. I figured I put him in a box as more as just a recruiter and more of like a hype guy, but that coaching staff's doing a really good job at their scheme, and then also just developing players into really solid SEC caliber guys. And so I'm really excited for that matchup. I'm excited to see Georgia actually go against a tough opponent. I've been waiting for them to drop a game with all these like close ones
That's
um,
crazy.
against like subpar competition, like not good SEC competition to this point. So that's what I'm looking at. And then I agree. I mean, Bama's road looks somewhat easy. Auburn's always tough at the end of the year, but I would be surprised. Well, they still have LSU and
Yeah,
Auburn, um, but I would be surprised if they weren't playing for an SEC championship.
I agree. I think the Georgia road is going to be interesting just based on you got Tennessee, which they're going to be ready for that game. I'm not saying Tennessee's as good as they were last year, but Missouri has surprised me big time. I agree with you on Drinkwitz being more of a recruital hype guy, salesman, getting people in. And they tried to lose that Kansas State game. They got a delay of game on a like field goal and made a prayer. Good for them. It's going to be interesting to see. I think the best team that's really gone in there to Georgia so far is Kentucky in my mind, and they blew the brakes off Kentucky. So kind of what I'm thinking is I think this team hasn't lost in so long that they are playing to their competition. I think that they know when it's a big game, but that's why I think their struggles. Like I think they look at a South Carolina and they go into that game flat just because they're not amped up and they're not ready to go. And I think Kirby Smart came in after half, and I mean they kicked ass in the second half, but I mean it was still close. But they were down 14. I'm with you. I
Yep.
think LSU is going to be an interesting game. I think that Auburn's going to be a good game just because it always is. Um,
Mhm.
but going forward, I think those two are definitely the juggernauts. And I'd love to see Alabama because they're kind of rolling now, man. They're kind of getting it together. Get down early and bounce back hard against Tennessee and take ownership of that game and get out of there with a 14-point
Yeah,
win. So,
that was a really good
yeah,
win. I'm glad they kind of just stuck behind Milrow. He's playing better.
yeah,
I
he's the
hate
guy for
teams that
sure.
bounce around QBs. It's never, I mean, it never ends well. So that's good to see.
Yeah. Well, let's get into the debate topics for the day. The first one, we got to talk about it. I really don't want to, but the Hogs go into a bye week after an absolute horrible performance. Enos, their offensive coordinator, was let go from the team. With that being said, what are we expecting for the Hogs for the rest of the year? Because Pittman's come out and said that they're not throwing the season away, that they believe they can still get this done. But I just feel like watching that game, energy was flat, and it didn't look like a team that really wanted to be out there, Brad. So, what are you kind of looking for the rest of the season? Like, what do you expect?
Yeah, I definitely didn't expect what we saw Saturday. I mean, that was surprising. I mean, you're a 2-5 team. You've finished your gauntlet of the year, right? We've been talking about it all year. We knew the early part of the season was going to be tough. There's going to be wins available towards the end. And this was kind of that one of those first games where we're like, okay, here we go. We're back at home after a huge road trip. Mississippi State, nothing crazy. Here we go. We're gonna get on a roll. This is where it starts. Okay, we didn't could not have been the more opposite of what actually happened. I mean, 3 points in the entire game, all from the first drive, and what should have been a touchdown. Um, so to say that it gets worse, they literally can't. So I mean, I'm definitely expecting a little more than what we saw Saturday. But at this point, it's like I don't think the team finishes undefeated. And so what you're playing for is really next year, right? Guys are going to be playing for jobs. Unfortunately, I feel like guys are going to be playing for scouts for other teams and the transfer portals to put
Yeah.
on some good tape for the transfer portal, which is obviously unfortunate. But I mean, at least we'll see some effort out on the field for the rest of the 2023 season. Um, but the last thing I really expect is anyone to throw this season away. I mean, with the amount of opportunities these college athletes have nowadays with movement and NIL, I expect 100% effort. But yeah, I don't share the same optimism that Sam Pittman does on making a bowl for 2023.
Yeah, I don't think we're making a bowl game either. I do think so. This is kind of my conspiracy theory here because our offense is better than what we did. It was. We've been in close games. We scored points on Bama. There's no excuse to score 3 points. I think this was the players showing that they did not want to play for Dan Enos. And I think Sam Pittman is one of the guys that you want to play for. And I think he's been able to get him through the season. And it's just listening to the press conferences, sitting there just talking about the volume. And we're just not like Enos was making it way harder than it needed to be. And I think this fan base was really hard on Kendall Briles. I think Kendall Briles did a great. Yeah, there's some bad calls. Everyone has bad calls every game, um, but I mean, it was like he's doing great, top 25 in a lot of statistics in college football at TCU. he has a freshman quarterback now due to an injury, and they're still looking good. He simplified the playbook, and we ran the ball how we ran the ball well. He didn't try to do a bunch of crazy stuff all the time. Like I feel like most of the stuff we're doing on offense is just slow developing and stuff that KJ is not good at. When your quarterback, who's your leader that the offense relies on, is not good at the plays you're calling, nothing is going to go right. And that's where like my main struggle with this whole thing is because people were asking Pittman in the press conference, and he's like, you know, over the summer we're getting clips of Tesla doing outbreaking routes in the red zone, throwing up jump balls, and he's getting up and winning these 50-50 balls, and we don't see that. We see these dominant runs where our offensive line's getting downhill to the left that's like an inside, like outside zone, getting downhill, getting in the trenches. And we don't see that. Like everything that we've kind of been doing is like a stretch. You can't tell me that Bo Limmer and Brady Latham, who are two guys that were like on, first and second team watch list for the SEC, forgot how to play football. You can't tell me that. Like that doesn't happen. This scheme that was being run did not fit the system. I don't think Dan Enos is a bad coach. I just think that maybe KJ is very good at particular things, and our offense is very good at particular things. But when you try to bring all this stuff, it's just confusing because you're going through these plays, Brad, and it's more like a walkthrough. Like, how do we look? This is how we're going to run the routes on this look. It's not like we're running these with repetition, just get downhill and perfecting this stuff. It's more about looks. And I don't mean to go on a rant here, but I'm furious, Brad. It is so bad. I cannot believe I sat in the stands and watched that product on the field. And I'm not one to talk bad about my team. I fully, they have all of my, positive energy. I'm going to root for them every week, no matter what, if we win a game for the rest of the year. But it was super hard to watch as a fan, and it just makes me think that our guys don't want to play for him because the defense was running to the ball. They were playing hard. Special teams was playing hard. The offense was the one that looked sluggish and looked like they didn't want to be out there. That's my thought. What you got to say?
Yeah, you raise an interesting point on Enos not kind of forming a scheme around the players he has. If you look at his career, and the stops he's made along the way, it's been hit or miss, and like by a mile. He's either killing it at Alabama as the QB's coach, winning national championships, or he's getting hired by Miami as the OC, and then he's fired 6 weeks into the gig. And then he gets hired by Maryland for the OC, does really good up there. We could get him for, 7 weeks, and then he's out the door again. Yep. And so I think you're kind of on it right there with he's not very, flexible on kind of what he wants to do as an offense to the players that he has around him. And I mean, that's not a formula for winning football at all. I mean, we've heard that forever. Like the best coaches do what they do best based on what players they have. I mean, look at Lamar Jackson's like a perfect example in the NFL. Like John Harbaugh had Joe Flacco for 12 years. He goes from that to Lamar, and it's like the organization doesn't skip a beat. Playoffs every year, one of the best teams in the NFL now. I mean, that's the sign of a really good head coach in general. If you can't adjust to kind of the strengths of what you have, like, what are we doing? And so if that's the case, and I think you're probably right, yeah, he had to go now and should have probably been gone a long time ago. But, brighter things ahead, hopefully.
Yeah. Just to conclude this, looking at this team, the defense that we have, it's so clear that the scheme is what's wrong. And I think that you said that word for word last week, talking about Iowa football, when we were talking about y'all's OC. And it just feels like a completely wasted year because I think that you have KJ, you have Rocket, you have all these guys. The pieces are there. The scheme is the problem. And it just sucks swallowing. Moving on to Iowa football, because I think that we really need to dive into this. They were robbed of one of the worst calls that I've ever seen in my life. With that being said, man, we look at NFL the next day, and the Indianapolis Colts lose because they have back-to-back PI calls on an uncatchable ball Like we're seeing all these things come up. Are refs ruining games? Like it seems like there's been multiple weeks in the NFL, and then you see the Iowa clip, game changing calls, back to back weeks. Brad, you're the Iowa fan. Tell us what was going through your head when that was going on, man.
I mean, obviously disappointment. I mean, I had never heard of that call before. An unintentional fair catch. Never heard of it. I've always seen kind of what Cooper DeJean did, like point at the ball, kind of give a signal of get out of the way for kind of the gunners coming back to block. Very normal. I've seen many guys pick that up and, go for a return if it like kind of gives them a good bounce or whatnot. Usually they don't take it to the house like he did and win the game or potentially
Yeah, that
win the
was
game.
insane.
But yeah, never. I didn't know that was a reviewable call. We all the fans, I assume, thought they were reviewing on whether if he stepped on the sideline or not, which because that was kind of close. It was maybe a few inches or so, but it was pretty clear he stayed in bounds. And then they announce that kind of ruling of an unintentional fair catch call. I don't know. And so obviously I was disappointed, but I was still at the moment like somewhat confident because we got the ball at the 50-yard line
Yeah,
and all we
yeah.
needed was a field goal. And there was 2 minutes left. I was like, okay, like let's go. And Iowa offense literally could not complete a pass. I think we threw a pick like 3 plays in. It's like, okay, like sure it would have been awesome. And they did kind of rob us of like a game winning punt return, but I mean the offense is so bad, like that's all you can like think about. And so did they blow us the game? Sure, but like so did Deacon Hill in that offense. Like it was bad.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that you look at it that way because that's a bad loss. Now y'all kind of have to win out to get to where we were talking, big, championship game. The thing that blows my mind on this call in particular is if you look at the sideline, if you're watching the clip, right? The sideline for it's not Iowa's sideline. Y'all's opponent's sideline is right there, and no one is pointing and like acting like there was a fair catch. Everyone on the field knew that that's a live ball, which you have to think that ref went and started watching this to review if he stepped out of bounds, number one, and then decided to say that, oh my gosh, he's calling for a fair catch there. Like everyone else in their right mind is sitting there. Like you can't tell me that anyone is thinking like, oh my God, he called a fair catch. Like, what's going on? It was the worst
That's a good
call
point.
that I've ever seen in my life. That ruins the game for Iowa. Like, they win that game, and it's bullshit. For time purposes, you got anything else on this? Because I kind of want to get into at least one of our next points.
No, disappointing loss, but I mean, what's new?
Yeah, for sure. I think we're having a kind of a tough year with our college teams so far. So hopefully basketball season will be a little bit better. Okay, staying in the college realm, um, we're seeing a lot of highly ranked teams struggle, Brad, week to week to week. Is this a bad thing for college football? Because we're so used to having these three or four teams every year that are just shoe-ins for the playoff. And right now, it's looking like with all the controversy with Michigan, we don't know what's going to happen. You have Ohio State that's still doing their thing. Penn State's lost, and then you got your SEC team, Georgia undefeated. Everyone else kind of has a loss here. And then you got Washington, Florida State, obviously, but they haven't been extremely dominant. Is this a bad thing for college football? We have 9 minutes and 40 seconds left. So, what do you think?
I don't think so. I mean, if you look back, like, yes, Georgia's been super dominant the last 2 years, but really no one else was. Um, I guess Bama with Bryce Young 2 years back. We thought they were kind of the dominant team, then lost to Georgia national championship. I mean, I don't think it's bad at all. I mean, I love the parity. I love having, more than, two or three teams kind of in it for a national championship. I think that's good for everyone. Keeps everyone engaged, especially with guys leaving early for the draft. When bowl season comes around, it's nice to hopefully kind of keep as many players kind of engaged as possible, especially with the 12 team playoff coming up next year. I think that'll be really cool. But no, I definitely don't worry about kind of, you know, dynasties or, elite kind of dominant teams. I kind of like kind of, the parity and kind of the unknown aspect of kind of college football in general. And it's made for an exciting year for sure.
I couldn't agree more. I think this is a good thing for college football. I think NIL has opened up opportunities. People aren't just going to Alabama and going to Georgia and doing all that stuff because of the legacy and the dynasty, the hot teams at the time. Because we were kind of in a rut there before NIL. I don't agree with everything NIL, but it has given opportunities to schools that, for example, Fayetteville has, Walmart, all these corporations there. Every place has their different stuff to offer, and it's a unique way of being able to bring in people, get involved in the community. I think it's been great because I'm just like you, man. I want to go into a game and I want to see games every week that may not be college game day or a high ranked matchup and be like, damn, man, we're watching good football. We're not watching Alabama beat Tennessee by 30, you know. So I think it's a good thing. Real quick, we'll get into our last before we get into these pick'ems. Just a couple minutes on this, Brad, but the Detroit Lions get stomped at the Ravens after going on a 5-game win streak. Is this the same old Lions team? This is the first real competition they've had other than the Chiefs, or will they bounce back?
I think they'll bounce back. I think that game was more about kind of what's to come for the Ravens. They look super sharp. Lamar has complete control over that offense, hitting on all cylinders, using his weapons throughout the offense. Guys are finally stepping up. Odell had a good game. Zay Flowers. They kind of had some rough patches here and early with some drops and stuff like that. And so no, I was super impressed with the Ravens. Not really worried about the Lions. Sometimes it's good to get kicked in the teeth and early on in the year and kind of learn from kind of what happened. And Lamar I think he's 16-1 against the NFC. So I mean, so what that tells you is going against him first time, it's a tough matchup, and he's a special player, and so yeah, definitely not worried. It was kind of surprising, kind of the magnitude in which the blowout was. But yeah, not worried at all. I think Ravens are really solidified themselves as a Super Bowl contender, and I think the Lions will eventually get there as well.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about it. I think things like this happen in the NFL. They're two good teams going at it. Some days it's just not your day. Like we saw it with San Fran. They've had two kind of down weeks. Not saying that they deserve to win both of those games, but I mean, it's common because NFL you really there's a couple really bad teams, but for the most part there's talent on every squad, and no matter what you kind of have a chance. You don't see a lot of like 14-point spreads like you do in college. A lot of them are, the most you'll see is 10. So with that being said, I'm not worried about them. We'll see how they bounce back. Gibbs looked good. Defense, they need a bye week, get a little healthy, and we'll move forward. With that being said, that wraps up our debate topics for the day. Let's move straight into our pick 'em. We got 5 minutes, Brad. The first game of the week, we got Duke at Louisville. Duke lost to Florida State last week after being in a pretty close game for a while. Their quarterback goes down. I don't know if he's playing this week. Louisville's at home. They've looked good, Brad. What you think? Louisville's -4.
Yeah, I mean,
sorry, I didn't even say the spread.
yeah, you're good. You brought it up, Riley Leonard. He's kind of been having lingering ankle issues since that Notre Dame game. Had to leave game early against Florida State. That's kind of where my mind's at with picking this game. I'm taking Louisville -4. Riley Leonard's a special player, but if he's not out there, it's going to be tough for Duke to stay in this one.
Yeah, I think that's a big challenge for him. I'm actually going to go Duke or +4. I think you've dropped two in a row. You're a good team. You bounce back. Tennessee at Kentucky. Tennessee's -4 here. I'm riding the Vols -4, Brad. I think that they bounce back from like they didn't play bad against Alabama. The game got away from them late. Give me the Vols -4 on the road.
Yeah, I agree. I think more of my pick is to do with Kentucky just not looking great this year. Pretty surprising coming in with a top kind of QB transfer out of the portal. I thought he would be a lot better. Um, but Tennessee's looked good. Not as explosive as they were last year. Lost a lot of guys in the draft. Um, but I think they got enough to handle Kentucky this weekend.
Oh yeah, I bring this game up for Dion prime time off of a bye week. Colorado at UCLA. UCLA's -17. Brad.
-17. That's a lot. I'm taking Colorado here. You mentioned it off a bye week. Um, I think they're hungry for a better performance than what they've been putting out of late. I still like Shador. I think he's a super talented kid. Travis Hunter's had time to get healthy. I think he'll be, back to kind of where we saw earlier in the year. And UCLA, I would still obviously pick UCLA to win this game. But their strength it lies on the defensive end, and so they're not going to be putting up huge offensive numbers, and so that's kind of where my head's at with the Colorado pick.
Perfect. I'm going Colorado as well. I think Dion gets those guys ready. I don't think they win the game by any means, but I think they got enough talent on offense to keep it close. 2-minute warning, Brad. We're going to stay in the Pac-12. Damn it. I know my Pac-12 ball. Oregon State at Arizona. Oregon State's -3.5. Give me the Beavers. I think Arizona's, playing better than a lot of people thought. So give them credit. But give me the Beavs. They're too much for them on the road. -3.5.
Yeah, I feel like this is kind of a trap game. That line is
It is very
surprising.
trappy. Very trappy.
So I've been going against the trap all year long. So give me the Wildcats.
There you
Um,
go.
I'll take Arizona at home
Yeah.
in conference. I think they get it done.
Yeah, there's a reason it's that close. I'm sure it's going to be a crazy game. College game day, Oregon at Utah. Brad. Oregon's -7 here. Cam Rising is not going to be available, I am pretty sure. So take it. We got 1 minute, so
I like Oregon. I really like them against Washington. I thought they played super well and definitely played well enough to win. Been playing like that all year long. Really love Dan Lanning. Give me Oregon.
well, at least we got a couple different ones in there. I'm riding Oregon as well. I think Bo Nix is the difference. They've got a solid veteran QB at the helm. Utah is going to be trying to put it together like they have all year. Good enough to beat USC, not good enough to beat Oregon. I think Oregon wins by between 10 and 14, so two-score ball game. I don't think it's going to be a crazy game. I think that Utah defense is going to keep them in it. But with that being said, that wraps us up, Brad. Hopefully you can bounce back on the picks. We need a 5 for 5. Next week, we're going to have a guest. So, again, want to thank Brad for being here. Thank all you guys for tuning in. Like and subscribe to the channel. We'll see you next week.